It's March 20th, 2022. Welcome to The Truth as We Know It. Joining us today from Louisville, Kentucky are Stephen Smith, Paul Moffett, and David Vislisel. In today's program, we discuss the topic integrity. Integrity is the practice of being honest and showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence to strong moral and ethical principles and values. In ethics, integrity is regarded as the honesty and truthfulness or accuracy of one's actions. Integrity can stand in opposition to hypocrisy, in that judging with the standards of integrity involves regarding internal consistency as a virtue and suggests that parties holding within themselves apparently conflicting values should account for the discrepancy or alter their beliefs. The word integrity evolved from the Latin adjective integer, meaning whole or complete. In this context, integrity is the inner sense of wholeness, deriving from qualities such as honesty and consistency of character. As such, one may judge that others have integrity to the extent that they act according to the values, beliefs, and principles they claim to hold. I posed a few questions, and I guess, after our discussion from the last couple of weeks, I was watching that interview with the new basketball coach, Kenny Payne at U of L. I don't know if any of you happen to see that. I was really struck by the fact that they spent very little time talking about basketball. They spent more time about talking about his integrity and his commitment to his students, his players, and that being the primary reason that U of L was looking for him. And I thought, well, that kind of ties in with the discussion we were having before. So I did pose a few questions, and I wanted to tell you that when I'm suggesting questions, that we're not limited to that. If you have something else that's on your mind or some variation on that, please. I'm not trying to, dictate terms here. I just trying to get the discussion started. So, Dave, since you may need to depart early, the question is about integrity. I put up a little definition of integrity, but I really want to know what does it mean to you if I say this person is or has or does not have a true integrity? What does that mean to you?
One of the things I love about what you're doing here is you're beyond defining, you're kind of even giving derivations and so on. So your little preamble there, including definitions, is wonderful. I think it's always the way to start. If you can't agree on, what it means, then, what's the use? We can argue. Integrity is, and it spells it out, I think, beautifully. We're all imperfect human beings. I'd be amazed if anyone lived a life of perfect integrity. It means being true to what you are, what you think, what you believe, even as it changes. You are looking for truth and honesty, and you do your very best. If you are a person of integrity, to align what you think and feel with what you say and what you do. That's it for me.
Yeah. Paul, can I pose the same question to you? Is that what does this mean to you?
Well, I was listening to you, or I was reading them earlier and thinking about this, and I was thinking, this is not a simple thing to define. Mm-hmm. You can't just go and go, okay, integrity, right? Check. No, because you have to know that somebody, you have to know something about him, you have to have some history. When somebody says to you, I'm suspicious when somebody says, oh, he's a lot of integrity. I'm going to want to know that. What does that mean to you or that person? Because that term gets tossed around in order to manipulate people, and I'm not very fond of that particular activity. So that was, I kind of got really hung up in trying to decide on how to deal with this. I did watch the basketball thing some, And I thought, well, gosh, here's this poor guy. He was really planning on working really hard, and he's been dumped on essentially by everybody, even though knew it was going to happen. It was going to happen to him. You're going to have you got integrity, guy. Well, yeah. And U of L at this point, U of L basketball program, that doesn't really require much effort.
It's a low bar, right?
Low bar. Good, Paul.
On that, I'll let you go on.
Steve, do you have a take on this?
Well, I thought Paul, I'm sorry, that Dave set it up very nicely in terms of a definition. So I'm just thinking of a few things that go along with integrity. I think one of the things you look for is that your behavior matches your philosophy, your ideals. And so if you have integrity, your behavior should be above reproach. You should be impeccable in how you do things. And that could be a really good lessons for the U of L basketball coaches, I believe.
Yeah, I've thought about this, and I guess it's something we all strive for, but it's often difficult to do. And I can think of examples. The thing that hits me is I speak out and try to do things regarding environmental issues, and I guess get a little preachy about it sometimes. And yet I can see that I have too much trash. I do, I drive too much, or I do things that are contrary to what I believe, but kind of out of my control. I have to live in a society. And I guess the issue is, how far do you compromise? What, you want to be, as you said, Steve, impeccable, but that's the high bar. And sometimes you can't always, I want to treat people in a kind way, and yet sometimes I get pissed off and I express that. So I find that it's a striving more than an accomplishment. Occasionally you pull back and you say, well, wait a minute, that's not the kind of person I want to be, or that's not the way I want my life to be. So the other thing is, Dave, I'll get this to you too as well, is can you think of someone, now this could be someone or it could be a historical figure or celebrity or whoever it might be, probably not a politician, but somebody who might be an example of maintaining their integrity. Do you have someone that you kind of model after?
Yeah, well, yes, I've thought about it. I've looked through, I put my mind through remembering presidents and our founding fathers, for example, who wrote and supposedly believed all men are created equal and there's equality in this Constitution and in our plan of action here. And yet, when you're talking about men who run the country or vote or represent, it was only landowners. It was no blacks need apply, and it was no women, well beyond the point where black men were enfranchised. So there isn't much to model there. If you're looking at integrity, they probably thought of themselves as having integrity, but today we see how many flaws there were in it. Whether they recognize that or not, I don't know. But in answer to the specific question, I think I would look no farther than Michael Price as a model. You laugh, but I've known Mike since Dustin was in diapers. Well, wait, before that, we met on the farm, you and Tony, when you were renting a place, and Tony was pregnant, and you were trying to figure out what you were going to name your first kid.
Yeah,
kid. Yeah,
we named him Kid. Yeah.
We've had an off and on relationship in terms of seeing you monthly, or a long time it was daily when we worked together. But I can't think of one instance where I would have said that you were not a person of integrity in whatever you did. Now, you can pick flaws in yourself, and we're our own best and worst enemies, because, we hold standards. When I disappoint myself, that's the most grievous thing. If I disappoint you guys, well, I got to live with that. But it's so much a part of our inner souls, our conscience, our consciousness, our emotions, and but it's all, we've all got feet of clay. So my answer is Michael Price. And if I think of something, Michael, that I say, oh, I forgot about the time you.
Yeah, should give you some backstories. You might change your mind, but it's very flattering, David. It just puts a lot of pressure on someone to say that, but I do appreciate that. Paul, is there?
Please let me say that I believe that, not as a friend, or I'm being as objective as I can when I say that. So it's not personal, Mike.
Okay. Okay. Paul, let me change the subject. It does get. I tend to turn red when I get embarrassed. Probably light up your screen here. Anyone spring to mind for you, Paul? Is it?
It's funny because this thing has really been difficult to kind of cope with, because fundamentally the question of integrity is a moving target all the time. All the time. It's not just, you can't go like, okay, integrity, bing, check that mark off. You got, and so say, well, does somebody have? I've known people who have had integrity in what they were doing, and later I found out, well, over in this area they were doing something different. I'm certainly, not going to claim any kind of joint anywhere where I'm doing. I try to maintain integrity as much as I can, but in terms of the consistency of the philosophy that I'm running on, whatever that might be, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, mostly to discover that it's impossible. You can be sort of until you can aim at integrity all the time. And anybody, I've known some people who did, and I don't think I need to name them because that doesn't really, y'all don't know them anyway. And Michael and I would be talking about people we know in common, and that wouldn't really be nice. So I'm, I struggle with this one, because it's simply because it's always about something that's multi-level. There's no simple yes, no, this is the answer. It's the level. And, and then change. So it's like a shooting, it's like a target, moving target all the time. And I've certainly walked out of places and thought, I could have done a better job of that. and others where I thought, oh, okay, I did all right there, and I maintained myself in a way that's consistent with my personal philosophy, and that's where the integrity comes in. And you can't really take somebody else's and talk to about. You can model if you want to, but you always have to recognize that you're modeling, not actually doing it until you start to doing it. Yeah. So that's kind of a sloppy answer, but that's about as much as I could get it squared away.
That's fine. Steve, I'll pose the same question.
Okay. I, through my many years working in the federal government, of course, worked with, I guess it would be up in the number of thousands of other federal employees, hundreds for sure that I knew well. And there were a lot of people with integrity, but I'm going to pick out one who was my immediate supervisor and eventually became friends. She was my supervisor for the last 12 years that I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services. And first of all, I mentioned that it was a woman, And she operated very well in what tended to be somewhat male dominated, although Department of Health and Human Services had more women in senior positions than some of the other departments, but still it's a hard position. She was first as a deputy assistant secretary and then an assistant secretary. Now, in HHS, there was a secretary running the whole department, one deputy secretary, and then about a dozen assistant secretaries. So the head of CDC was an assistant secretary, the head of NIH was assistant secretary, and so on, FDA, and our agency, Health Resources and Service Administration. Some of the assistant secretaries are political appointees and some are career people. And this particular assistant secretary was a career executive. And so she was a model for me to follow in terms of how she managed things. Now, there were a couple of organizational changes where she asked me if I would come along with her to help work on a project, and those projects then developed into her assignment as an assistant secretary, and then I became her senior advisor. And for 8 years, we were running this Health Resources and Services Administration, where she's a career appointee and her bosses are political appointees. And so there were often times when the political appointees wanted something to be done, and she would have to say to them, well, sir, we probably don't want to do that because you don't want your actions to be appearing on the front page of the Washington Post. Now, we'll do anything in our power that's not illegal, unethical, immoral, or fattening. And we'll try to get your agenda accomplished. This doesn't matter whether, because it was both Democrats and Republicans that we work for. Doesn't matter which party you're in. We're there to make sure that the job gets done. But we also have many laws and regulations that we must follow. And our job is to get your agenda accomplished without you breaking any of those laws or rules. That was a hard position to be in, yeah. But she managed to pull it off. She was working there at the pleasure of the secretary, and a secretary could move her out of that job anytime they wanted to. But because we did actually deliver on many of the things they wanted, when they asked us to do something that wasn't ethical or legal, they would accept her version of what's best for them, and I think see through the integrity that she brought to the position. If we said we're going to do something, we did it. Mm-hmm. So okay. I saw other folks in the federal government that I could go to because I knew they had integrity. So, if they told you what they could do and what they couldn't do and what they would do, you can count on what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dave, you made it hard for me to cite an example. So it got a little personal for me, but I would say I wouldn't have invited any of you here if I didn't think you were not men of integrity. So that's a given here. I have learned, I say to myself oftentimes these days that I don't have time left enough to suffer with people that I don't respect. I just don't. I don't want to spend the time with them because I have a limited amount of time available to me. So I think for me, the kind of people that I respect the most are ones who are willing to pay the price for, as Steve was indicating, for, telling the emperor he has no clothes. You say the truth and you let the cards fall where they may. And I have known many people through my life who've been willing to do that, whether it meant losing their job or perhaps losing a friend. That you have to do what's right. and not always what's popular or what's pleasant to do. So I don't know if I have one particular shining model. Anybody who's ever had a Christian experience has had that, mythical kind of perfect person presented to them, and I don't think any of us are perfect in that way. But it's basically, when the going gets tough, anybody can have integrity when there's no pressure and when the pressure is on. I think of recently of the folks who came out in opposition to Donald Trump, people who left his administration, said, I can't work, can't do this because it violates my conscience. So I guess the last question, and it's the inverse of this. What does it mean to not have integrity? We think of hypocrisy, I guess, as the direct opposite, where I say one thing and I do something else. But is it possible for me to be an evil person with integrity? In other words, is there honor among thieves? Dave, you're telling us you are, or what? Is it time for you?
I'm confessing. I've got to leave in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm glad you got to this question. And so I would ask you, and you guys can go into it after I leave in a few minutes. And I would love to hear what you think of this. Is it possible that Vladimirovich Putin is an integral person? Everything I can think and feel says no, but somewhere in there, he's got something he has in mind. And here's the baffling part of integrity to me. You've got the white man coming to the coast of Africa, and they say, hey, we can use some of these barely human black folks to work for us. So how about they plotted to go to the black tribes close by and said, look, you've got enemies. Of course we do, other tribes in. How about going capturing them and bring them into us, and here's money? Were those black tribes who did that not integral? That is, it may be that what they believed is, this is our tribe, we take care of each other, we shun somebody we don't like or who's violated our rules, but we've got enemies all around, and it's only right and proper and ethical and moral to defend ourselves. Think about that, defending yourselves, as America says it does. Is America an integral country? It's really complex because human nature is so varied. But when it comes, bottom line is, for instance, I think of myself as a realist, pragmatist, idealist, maybe in the reverse order, because I'm really an idealist. Michael, I don't know if you remember when you asked Kyle Ellison and me, who are you going to vote for? Or what do you believe? Who do you believe is the best candidate? I said Bernie Sanders, by far and away. Then I said, but that's in an ideal world. And I think that if I vote for Bernie Sanders and enough people do, this is going to be a close election. So I fell back on what I believe is part of my integrity is a realist, real politics. And I said, I'm going to vote for Biden. And I did. In an ideal world, I would have done otherwise. So am I lacking integrity because I really wanted Bernie Sanders, or that kind of thinking and, the whole world view and AOL and, there are a number of others, or not? I don't know. That's a question that you guys might explore. Let's see if I have anything else I want to say quickly. Yeah, I made a comment here to myself that most everyone wants to be and mostly think of themselves as being integral. but things are complex and varied and so on. And say, in my case, I believe I've always been around guns, growing up hunting and so on. I still have a couple guns, 3 guns today. I would be willing to shoot somebody if he was threatening me inside my own home. So am I lacking integrity if I say that? Or am I being true to what I really think and believe? I think it's the violation of that is the violation of integrity, even if it's Putin or Hitler.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fuzziness in all this.
Yeah.
I stop there, and I'll leave you guys in a couple of minutes, or 3. If I leave, I'll just leave. And thank you for being here, and thanks for being willing to accept me as a voice here.
I'll send you a follow-up. Thank you, Dave.
Love you guys.
Paul, what about this? This is the antithesis. Examples of lack of integrity, not necessarily your personal experience, but somebody you might call out for having a lack of integrity.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of those people is a fellow named Al Ross, who was a hustler, cheap hustler. He sold glassware out of the back of a truck, right? And here's a shiny thing, and here's all the pictures of these and all these. It was Pyrex glassware. Well, of course, it wasn't. It was cheap copy, and tended to break real easily. But he was selling for $20 a bag, and we really sell it for $89.95, but we'll give it $20 a bag. I mean, it was a hustler, and he was really good at it. I mean, he was really good at it. I watched him working, thinking, how's this guy do this? How these people all fall into that trap, and which of course then brought me around to the fact that, well, okay, this is where some of this problem comes in, is that you got to decide in advance, practically, how are you going to deal with somebody like that? I had a job unloading his trucks, is where how come I got connected up with him. I was just this kid out here unloading trucks. And I would count him as definitely a man who had no integrity, but he didn't have consistency in what he was doing. And he was fairly good at it too. And sometimes he would do something nice, but he was a con man, only a cheap con man. $20 glassware, this is not exactly high-end work here. And so I would have to say for my personal experience, Al was, and I keep one of these things thinking, I'm going to write a book about this, just this story, because, he taught me early on that, that you can't, and I'll use a vowel word here, you can't fuck an enemy, you can only fuck a friend.
Wow.
And the way it used, meaning you're going to fuck them out of their money.
Mm-hmm.
That was what he said. You got 30 seconds to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, I mean, I was broke and needed the money. So I was kind of inclined to, ease by on that one, but I couldn't keep it up. That's because it's, utterly dishonest. But, again, this is watching a guy who was good at what he did. And yet it was, it was a criminal. I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say a corollary of that might be, was he immoral or amoral?
I think that was amoral.
Violating and knowingly violating something that he considered to be a rule, or did he just not care? Didn't recognize any moral authority.
No,
It's an interesting kind of spinoff.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Steve, let me pose it to you. It doesn't, I'd like to know what your feelings are about. Bye, Dave. Have a good day.
Take care, guys. See you next week, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay. Steve, the opposite, I suppose, in maybe an example of how you have responded to someone who you consider to be, you know, on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Okay. Well, let me start by saying that shortly before we got on this morning, I sent an email out to everybody with a short quote from Hannah Arendt, the social philosopher. And she was making the point, going back to your earlier question, that can somebody be evil and still have integrity? And the little quote in that, she said, well, yeah, criminals can really illuminate for us what's evil. But the person who is a hypocrite is actually the one who's rotten to the core. So you could have somebody who's evil and have integrity to their own point of view, as the question that you were just posing. You know, somebody who's amoral, they're not violating their own moral standards if their moral standard is, I can do anything to anybody and it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is my benefit. That could be an evil person, and they could have integrity in their evil ways. But if you're a hypocrite, you're lying about what is your core values. And you are violating those core values as a hypocrite. So I'm not sure if I'm making a question now that I went off on a ramble.
No, I think so. I would contrast, I suppose, Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. Donald Trump, I consider amoral with no core, no values. Mitch McConnell has some internal values, but he lies all the time. He will say one thing, and then when it's convenient, he'll say the opposite. You know, no, there's not enough time to appoint a judge. Oh yeah, well, we have to rest it. You know, that speech, money is speech. You know, there's no way the son of a bitch believes that, but he says it anyway. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was going to be mine. I'm sorry I didn't see that quote earlier. I like this from her name is Arendt.
Anna. Yeah, I'm not sure how.
Arendt. Yeah.
Arendt, way I say it, but that's right.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was getting ready is how this relates to some of the things going on today, and I'd like to talk about wokeness. That it seems to me, and I struggled to try to understand what people were really referring to when they talked about being woke, or cancel culture is another way of looking at it. That you hold someone to a standard that is totally unreasonable. You know, it's what we do with our heroes these days. We want someone who is going to be perfect. And when we find out they have, you know, whatever, their feet of clay, we punish them by rejecting them totally. You know, that if someone commits if someone is not a sex offender, but someone is, I'm losing the word for it here, but someone who is disrespecting women, maybe has a personal problem there, but is otherwise a decent individual. I think of Garrison Keillor, who was, I don't know if you followed him or not. I was a big fan of Garrison Keillor. I saw him in person 5 or 6 times when he was in town. Really liked his performances. And he was accused of sexual harassment on the job and has disappeared. You know, basically he was a writer, you know, radio performer, just disappeared. And I thought, well, is that really totally fair? You know, okay, yes, he probably did something inappropriate. I don't think it was not a rape or anything violent like that, but he probably did something inappropriate on the job. If I'm being honest, I did the same thing at one time. You know, I would have someone, a coworker, and I would, you know, make some sort of overture that was unwelcome. And I didn't do it intentionally, but, you know, that's the way they interpreted it. So we live in an age now where if I say or do anything that someone considers to be, you know, beyond the mark, I get canceled. I get, you know, it's like, can you not can you not forgive? So the idea of integrity, do we have to, can we recognize someone who has faults as still having integrity? As I was saying earlier, it's the striving. I want to be a perfect person, but I'm not. So do I lack integrity? Paul, does that make sense to you? What I'm asking is how do you deal with people's imperfection?
Well, you're right. You correct that it's an impossible standard. We would essentially not be able to talk to anybody because we were likely to say something that was inappropriate. Or you say something that the other person thinks is inappropriate, but you don't think is inappropriate. So who's right, who's wrong? I have this problem slightly with my daughter, Adrian. I was rereading Huckleberry Finn. Because I like that novel from way back when I read it a couple of times. And but I mean, of course, you look at it now, it's like screaming incorrect, and well, actually, how do we say that? I'm not in practice for doing the N-word. The N-word on the slaves, right? Who was N-word Jim. I mean, that's kind of awkward, but that's basically what it was. And I said something to her about it. I asked her if she'd ever run, and she'd been, and they had she run into reading it anywhere along the way, and she said no. And which is most undoubtedly in part because she's part black, so that was a reason not to in the school that you would have been in, they would have just cut her out of that. You don't have to read Mark Twain because that would be offensive. And yet it's the great American novel, the beginning, the beginning great American novel, and I'm chugging along through it. So.
Well, I suppose the irony was that at the time, Clemens was progressive.
Oh, yeah.
He was painting this picture of Jim as being a human being, revealing the humanity of people that of a person that others might consider to be, nothing more than an animal. So and within the context of his time, he wasn't a racist. It's just times changed.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but people we haven't figured out how to tell people how to do that. How do you not? Okay. I mean, I know a lot of people we have this discussion on a regular basis about whether or not you can use these words. Which words can you use? As you said, the whole, I mean, it just, it boggles my mind to the point that I just ignore it. I try not to get around and get into discussions with people about that question of, who's black. Is it okay if you're black and you say the N-word, or is it not okay if you say the N-word but apologize for it, or can you say it if you're talking about a novel?
I may have told you this story, but I had a dear departed friend, Joe Fowler, who was a teacher at Trinity and was a baseball coach. And one day in class, one of his students went to the principal. This was an African-American student who went to the principal and said that Mr. Fowler used the N-word in class. So principal calls Joe into the office and lays it out, says, this kid says you use the N-word in class. He said, I don't know what he's talking about. I wouldn't do that. I never used that word. And he said, well, the kid says it. So they called the kid down and they said, well, what did Mr. Fowler say? He said Negro League. He was talking about Satchel Paige in the Negro League. And this black student thought that the word Negro was the N-word. So one of the things that's happened is the kids growing up now, they don't know. So we say, you can't use this word. Well, why can't I use that? They've never heard it spoken in hatred, perhaps. The only time they've ever heard it is in rap music. I had a kid who was a white kid in class who was playing a rap song that used nigger, nigger, nigger over and over again. And I said, whoa, you can't do that. You've got friends here. He didn't know what I was talking about. He said, well, it's just music. So sometimes the what someone considers to be inappropriate, other people are not aware of it. I'm sure there are many more examples of that, but the question, Steve, was about this tendency to exclude people based on a perceived inappropriate word or behavior. How does that strike you? Are you observing the same thing?
Well, I wouldn't think a word, one time would be, appropriate response would be to push them out of whatever system they're in. But I do think that there should be pretty high standards for people who are in positions of power and dominance. The highly paid basketball coach, the CEO, or the manager who has, hundreds of employees. I think they have to set a standard for everybody else. As a leader, I think there should be less tolerance than, for two employees of the same rank, when one of them says something that the other one finds offensive. There should be some way to work that out without canceling the offender. But when you're in a position of power and you're making unwanted sexual advances over and over again, I don't think you should keep that position of power.
Yeah. That's. I guess I was citing a couple of examples. One was Keeler and my friend Joe, but I remember someone else being. I've forgotten the context, but someone used the word niggardly.
Yeah, which is different.
Oh, you can't say that.
Yes, you can.
I can't say that. It's a word, that I think one of the things that happens is some of these extremes, and this is the pushback that's coming in some cases from the right, but sometimes other times from the left. I hear Bill Maher talking about this all the time, about these unrealistic things that we put up to judge other people or cancel other people. It just doesn't make sense, and that's it. It drives a wedge between us. So it's interesting. This has been fascinating for me. I think about integrity quite a lot. I guess particularly when I'm talking about my kids, that I hope when I die that they're going to think of me as someone who's had integrity, and I think about things I do and how I make decisions and how I live and so forth. And contrary to what Dave says, I don't see myself as a paragon of integrity by any means, but I do have a desire to kind of fall into that camp. So any other parting thoughts?
I do think it's I agree that integrity is not a constant given, that it's a ideal that you're striving for, and but the striving becomes apparent in the accumulation of your actions and your words, and so others can see that accumulation of action and words, even though you've fallen down, made mistakes, done things contrary to your ideals. So keep striving is what I would say.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story to part with. I've been doing some cleaning up. I guess one of the things I have to be honest with you, I'm a little nervous about having surgery this week.
Sure.
It's not the cutting; it's the anesthesia that I worry about. And I am going through these preparations to try to get ready for afterwards, but also try to get ready in case there is no afterwards. Who knows what's going to happen. So I was cleaning up downstairs, and I was rearranging a bookcase, and I put a mirror, a small mirror, on top of the bookcase, kind of leaning it back. And in the middle of the night, that mirror fell off and broke, made, just colossal sound. I thought, wow, breaking a mirror, not something I want to do this week. But then it occurred to me, they say it's going to be 7 years bad luck. So, right, that presumes I'm going to be here for another 7 years. So maybe if I break a mirror every day, I'll live forever. Who knows?